It's the Knicks, Jets, etc. podcast with Alex Trataros, John Meleka, and Raisi on the beat. Let's go.
What's good, everyone? Alex Trataros here with another Knicks episode of the Knicks, Jets, etc. podcast. And with me, as always, my buddy, my coach, my pal, the man with the plan, the one and only, John Meleka. But before we ask John how he's doing, guys, you know what it is. Got to give the national usual call out for all you out there, wherever you Knicks fans and Jets fans are. If you listen to this podcast, we're available on all audio listening platforms. That's Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon, Alexa, Stitcher, you name it. We are there. If you listen to us on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to give us a 5-star rating. And if you listen to us on Apple, please make sure to leave a comment that helps oh so greatly. We're also on YouTube, so please make sure to subscribe. We're on Knicks, Jets, ETC, period. No one writes out, etc. That's just wild. Make sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell. That way you know when the new episode drops. And when you watch a video, hit the like button, leave a comment. We want to know what you want to say. Add to the conversation. We'll respond to you. It's all good. And while you're over there, we got another podcast, Winning Picks Weekly. John and video producer Greg usually go down the NFL slate, betting for NBA, betting for baseball. They don't do hockey. I don't know why, but they'll do betting for everything else. Golf, you name it. They got you covered. And then last and certainly not least, please make sure to follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, you name it. We are there. John, how are you doing today, man? How you been?
I'm good, man. I'm good. We broke some heat records in New York City today. It was like 90 degrees. Fake spring is here, and an NBA play-in series. Like, I would love to sit down and talk about how well that went for our Silver and how disappointed I am that the Knicks aren't there. But I digress. Right? We're as everyone likes to talk about. I have hopium, man. I got all the hopium in the world right now. The Knicks are sitting okay right now. We got the lottery. We got some draft assets. We have some money. The Jets, the draft is coming up. Yankees, it's really early. So I'm living good, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing as well as it can be. It's raining out here in the Beantown, so staying dry and inside. But look, man, I'm not going to hold this guy off to the side any longer. We got a phenomenal guest with us today. Guys, if you're a Knicks fan, you've probably been reading this guy's work for the last 20 plus years, okay? He's been on the beat since what, 1999? I'm pretty sure it is. We got the one and only, the authority of the New York Knicks and tennis from the New York Post, Mr. Marc Berman on the pod with us. Hey, Mark, how you doing today?
Alex, John, thanks so much for having me. Alex, I love your Westchester Knicks shirt, and I know you live in Boston. So have you been down to Bridgeport, Connecticut to watch the Westchester Knicks in their temporary home?
I have not been down to Bridgeport to go watch them, unfortunately. But usually when I'm back home in White Plains, I make sure to go attend a couple games. Always at the county center. You can find me there. I feel like a king, unlike MSG where I have to spend hundreds of dollars. I could spend $50, sit courtside, go get a free meal up at the podium or on stage, and then go right back to go sit courtside and feel like I'm a king instead of having to go to the bleachers in Madison Square Garden.
Well, let's hope they're back at the county center next season, because I heard that the fan totals in Bridgeport, they weren't really drawing many fans, even though Miles McBride and Jericho Sims were lighting it up on some nights.
That's a tough draw. Going out all the way out to Bridgeport, it's a tough draw. I mean, you're talking about White Plains. You can hop on the Metro North. If you live in Harlem, that's about 20 minutes. Express, Grand Central, 30, 40 minutes. You're right there. Going out to Bridgeport, for my blood. I'm like, I love the guys that much. Got the shirt, I got a Westchester Knicks hat here too. It's a little much for me.
Well, Bridgeport's not the greatest city, but it must be Celtics country anyway out there, I would imagine. In Bridgeport, there are not a lot of Knicks. Well, there's probably a good chunk of Knicks fans, but I'm sure they share the town with the Celtics.
I'm sure. And even up here, like even in Boston, when the Knicks come up here, And I saw you up here, Berman. I saw you up here this season back in December. You were there covering the game. I saw you. I was not too far from you in the stands. But as you see, like Knicks fans show out in Boston too. And there's a good amount of Knicks fans up here in Beantown. So I'm not too alone, but obviously it's just to see a green out here. But everyone shows out for the game. So that's a good thing. But I'm sure Bridgeport.
There's a nice group of Knicks fans at Celtic games. But I will say, I have to hand it, those Celtics fans are loud. That is a very loud arena. It doesn't get maybe as much credit as Oklahoma City, but I'll tell you, they have a very nice crowd, and we'll see how the Brooklyn Nets handle it, especially with Kyrie in town.
For sure. That should be very interesting. It's going to be a good matchup. And being a New Yorker, living out here, having to see both those teams just kills me. So it is what it is, though.
We're just rooting for Game 7. Honestly, if Robert Williams was there, I think the series would be a lot more fun. But it is exciting to see how the defensive team goes against the really sloppy Nets. I mean, they do have the best player in the NBA with Kevin Durant, and they have the most skilled point guard with Kyrie. But you got to see if Seth Curry's hurt. They're missing Harris. I don't know if they could put up with the Celtics. What do you think, Mark?
I think it's going to be a long series. This is Udoka's first playoff series. It's different to coach in the playoffs. Steve Nash did well enough last season, but I don't know. They don't have the chemistry, obviously, and their defense has been terrible, and they don't have home court advantage. And if I had to pick it right now, I'd have to say the Celtics. I'm sure most prognosticators are going with Boston. Look what Boston did. They got rid of Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier, and they zoomed to near the top of the Eastern Conference. But I don't want to mention that.
Well, you did already. So now we
can't take it back.
Now we're here.
Now you can't take it back. Now we got to hop right into this. Take it back. So speaking about Kemba, speaking about Evan Fournier and everybody else that's part of this team, it's obviously a disappointing season that we saw after a magical season that we had for the 2021 season. Let's just get your general takes, Mark. What's your overall thoughts of the state of the Knicks as of right now, especially after this season?
Well, what happened was, as magical as last season was, it was a little fluky. I wrote to it after the Atlanta series. Once the Garden filled up and once they were playing on the road in a hostile environment, the Knicks were a different team. It's funny because last season I was made some road trips later in the season, and in Phoenix, it was 8,000 fans. It was the most fans to that point of the regular season, and the Knicks absolutely wilted in that hostile environment in the fourth quarter. And I had a little epiphany. I was like, wow, I've been watching the Knicks in empty arenas, and they've been so solid in the fourth quarter. Here they are on the road in Phoenix, and the fans are it's bedlam inside the arena, and the Knicks just rolled over. And from then on, I said, maybe some of this is a little fluky, and then Atlanta happened. But the chemistry was not right all season. There was something going on with Julius, and we probably don't know exactly what it was, but his head was not right. I know he got rattled by the fact the fans turned on him early. I was surprised. I thought he had earned a lot more leeway. He had a rough start to the season with turnovers, and he wasn't shooting well from the three-point line. And all of a sudden, the fans started booing a little bit. They were killing him on social media, and it affected him. And Julius's downfall to me was the major key, and the second biggest key was Derrick Rose going down in December and never returning.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I was the resident Randle apologist for the beginning half of the year for exactly that reason, and our solution was to bring in, like you said, Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier. Like, that was the answer. We got rid of Reggie Bullock, which was, by your accounts, by all other accounts, one of Julius's good friends last year. And he went to his hometown, right? And back in Dallas. So I'm sure he felt some sort of way about that. Elfrid Payton, another guy, not a big Knick guy, but he was a big Julius Randle guy. They played together. He left. So what are your thoughts on, just how the front office handled it, right? So we did have the miracle season. We got the almighty 4th seed. We got crushed by the Hawks. And, it's time to take that next step. And so we brought in Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier. Like, what was your thoughts on hindsight 2020, right? Of course. But what were your thoughts on how Leon Rose and the front office handled their, big offseason?
Well, it was a complete disaster. I mean, we're talking about a team that had the most cap space in the entire NBA. And I'm the first one to write in September in my newsletter that Scott Perry wanted to make a bigger push at DeMar DeRozan. And William Wesley and Leon Rose were against it. Wesley said he's not a three-point shooter, and he's probably on being close to washed up. I mean, he's getting older. And he turned out to be a godsend in Chicago. Chicago spent more money than the Knicks spent on Evan Fournier, but it was well worth it. And the Knicks wasted their money on Nerlens Noel. Listen, you thought they had to bring Derrick Rose back. No one really expected him to break down, but we shouldn't be that surprised. 33 years old with a long history of injuries. And I remember that night in Atlanta, or maybe it was in the afternoon, I can't remember, that when they got eliminated.
Mm-hmm. It was here in New York. 5
minutes left in the game. I don't know if the camera showed it, but Derrick Rose limped off the court and he was done for the night. They were getting blown out. Mm-hmm. And it carried over. He had ankle issues early in the season, didn't really want to make a big deal of it. And it just became a shock. I mean, a shock that he never came back. In mid-December, he had that ankle surgery and people were thinking he could be back in a month. So, but yeah, it just, everything that could have gone wrong went wrong with their free agent signings, including, we didn't even mention Nerlens Noel. In his contract year, he stepped up big time when Mitchell went down with that broken hand and broken foot, and he was a key anchor to that defense. And this season, from the first day of training camp, the guy could not stay healthy. Forget about only playing 25 games, he missed all of training camp and preseason. I mean, this guy just could not get on the court. And this was his history, but the Knicks still felt he was insurance against Mitchell Robinson not being healthy this season. And ironically, Mitchell stayed healthy. And we'll see if they could re-sign him with a contract extension. I think there's still a possibility, even though I know he has a wandering eye.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I can't really blame Nerlens too much. Like, as you said, he was the key last year, and I'm at the games, you're at the games. Nerlens Noel, every single time he's on the sideline, he has ice packs on every joint, right? He's holding the medicine ball, and he was, going, and they had the extra room for COVID, right? So he was just like walking around and doing his thing. So we knew what we were getting in the contract year, right? You mentioned Mitch in his contract year. He had the best season he's ever had. He was the healthiest he's ever been. But at what point, do the Knicks say, hey, we just did this with Nerlens? Like, what's our thoughts here? Do we double the contract for Mitch? And now we have two centers on the books that we just don't know what's going on. What are your thoughts on how the Knicks are approaching it?
Yeah, well, the fact is that they would have given him the $55 million, a month ago if they trusted Mitchell more with his injuries. And the work ethic has been a little bit of a question mark. Is he a winner? Does he do enough things offensively? Could you survive with a starting center who can't shoot from 10 feet out? But he had a great year, but it was his contract year. He's never been paid. What's going to be him? What is he going to be like once he gets this big contract? Noel, again, could not stay healthy, but even against Atlanta, Noel had a bad ankle, but he played through it. He wasn't playing through anything this season. Listen, it's a risk with Mitchell, but is Jericho Sims a starting center in this league? That's what they wanted to find out. After the All-Star break, they made Thibodeau play Jericho Sims a lot, and he looked okay. He looked like he's a good backup center. I don't know if he could be a 30, he's foul prone. I don't know if he's a 33-minute-a-night center, and he also doesn't shoot the ball. So they got four centers. I guess Taj could hit the three-pointer now, but essentially there were four centers on the roster who really don't shoot. And in this NBA, you need shooters. And that's why Miles Turner will be of interest in the offseason. He's a stretch five. And if the Knicks lose Mitchell and they know they could get Miles, that might be part of the strategy. And Miles is a pretty good shot blocker too.
I think the thing for me with Miles is more so like he's not truly like a guy that I could see working in the paint as much as like Mitch or even Jericho at this point. Like Mitch gives you just elite offensive rebounding. Sims seems to be a little bit more stronger. And even with Miles, you still have like some durability issues too. So I'm a little concerned when it comes to Miles. But do you think, like, speaking about like, you talk about like potentially losing Mitchell Robinson, you talk about Nerlens Noel's contract. Like, do you see the Knicks pulling back on this roster? Because we have a lot of young guys, especially that we saw towards the end of the season do well. Like you have Immanuel Quickley, Obi Toppin, Sims, Quentin Grimes, even though he got injured towards the end of the season. Do you see the front office pulling back on some of the roster and trying to make some trades this offseason and letting these young guys get some more burn?
Well, listen, the ultimate goal is to make a big trade, to get a superstar in here, hoping a Donovan Mitchell decides, okay, my run in Utah is over, and trade me to New York. Naturally, Danny Ainge could do whatever he wants. Do the Knicks have the pawns to get Donovan Mitchell? It would have to be a piece centered around RJ Barrett. I know Knicks fans are upset by that. I wrote my Knicks newsletter that, RJ is going to have to be the centerpiece of that deal. Julius Randle, his trade value has slipped. So, listen, I know they like the young guys, and I know Leon was on the TV promoting the young guys, and he has done a nice job with the 2020 and 2021 drafts. But are there any stars in that group? I don't think Obi Toppin is an all-star. I think he's going to be a very decent starting power forward. I don't see all-star in his future. So if their young guys have increased their trade value, terrific. That's a terrific development for the offseason. Because I know Leon, as he said Sunday night, he wants to be very flexible if there's an opportunity that comes up. And they do want to develop these young guys, but who knows if all of them will be back next season if the Knicks can pull off a trade, even if it's for a good point guard like Malcolm Brogdon from Indiana. I think the Pacers are blowing it up. Maybe a Brogdon, Miles Turner situation with Randle going back to the Pacers. I think Leon is going to try to make a big trade this offseason since he doesn't have any cap space.
Yeah.
Interesting. But you brought up Obi Toppin, and I mean, we got to see more run of Obi because Julius got sidelined. So with Obi, you see Obi getting traded. You don't see Obi staying here and just kind of being the next guy to slide in to the four position, even though like everyone, this is essentially what everyone's been clamoring for at this point. And everyone's now on the Obi train. We got everyone hyped for Obi Toppin. Even when Julius Randle's at the foul line, even when Julius is sitting on the bench, you get Obi Toppin chance. So you're telling me Obi's not part of this future here. And we even had Leon Rose come out today and say, with that whole message to the fans saying he emphasized the youth. So this is why I'm asking, like, is Obi Toppin going to be part of this future as well?
I think they don't want to trade Obi, but I think they will look to see if Randle can be included in a blockbuster. But yeah, I think that Leon and Wes, I think they were thrilled with what Obi did down the stretch of the season, especially the final 5 games. But the bigger thing was Thibodeau was super impressed. I mean, I've been told all along that Thibodeau had a lot of reservations about Obi, about his basketball IQ on the defensive end and even on offense, where he'd be a little out of position at times. I know Thibodeau wasn't happy earlier in the season when Obi would get the ball behind the 3-point line. He would never look at the basket. He'd just hand the ball off. He had lost his confidence. But the way he closed out this season, he's a terrific player on the fast break, and he's a good passer, good ball mover. He showed his basketball IQ on the offensive end. But the biggest thing is he was hitting that 3-point shot, and that changes everything because then players have to defend him at the 3-point line, and then Obi could get to the basket. And they started to utilize Obi's skills more. And without Randle, playing in those final 5 games, Obi was able to make a mistake and not worry about being taken out. As he said on more than one occasion in the last week of the season, he said the big difference is I'm not worried about making a mistake and coming out of the game because Thibodeau does not let you play through mistakes when you're a young player. You're either going to produce for me or you're not going to play.
Yeah, so as much as it was a problem what the Knicks did to Randle, I really wasn't on board. If that's the narrative that you're going to take, then at the same time, it's our fault that Obi is this confident. It's our fault that Obi was able to get these minutes, especially if the coach doesn't want him in there. You know what I mean? We kind of did this, which, for better or for worse, I know it makes us look bad, right? Like we're booing Julius Randle 20 games in, but Obi going from like 15% from three to, shooting at a 40% clip, like that was something insane that we just all needed to see. So I'm curious as to, do you think that Mitch and Obi works? Like, just to close off this last segment, because I know we talked about re-signing Mitch or, Miles Turner even, and we talked about Randle getting shipped and, maybe Obi there. When I'm watching Obi and Mitch, I just don't know if I could, like, in a playoff series, like, what is that going to do for you? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, if Obi's hitting his 3-point shot, Obi and Mitch works. But again, most of the season, Obi was not hitting his 3-point shot, so it wasn't a good combination. You had no big man who could shoot the three. And Randle was struggling from the 3-point range. I mean, one of the big issues with the Knicks was their big men can't shoot 3-pointers. So Obi shooting the three is huge. But I think it gives them great athleticism, the two of them, and they become a faster-paced team. They're attacking the rim, putting pressure on the rim. Obi's not a great shot blocker, but Mitchell is. Yeah. So it's not a bad combination. I think and Jericho is a similar player to Mitchell. Not as good yet, but I think Jericho and Obi made a nice combination, and they showed it in summer league. So I just feel they could become a faster-paced team when Obi's the starting power forward, as opposed to Randle. Now, if you can't trade Randle and you're coming back with Randle and Toppin, the big question, and I wanted to see it in the final games, I wanted to see Julius and Obi play together, but Randle had shut it down, and he didn't shut it down because he had a sore quad. Yeah. He had a sore quad, but he would have played through it. But he's in that final game that he actually played, he's on the court and they're chanting Obi Toppin's name. Yeah. And Julius is just not willing to play through pain if that's going to happen. So he shut it down. And then we got robbed of seeing that experiment of Obi and Randle. We've seen it I think it was 100 minutes. Thibodeau thinks it's a terrible defensive alignment. And he made the comment, if we're going to commit to that we're committing to having to outscore the other team. And that's not a Thibodeau philosophy. So Thibodeau does not want to do it. But next season, if they're both back, they're going to have to do it, at least for 15 minutes a game.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up Tibbs, so I want to know this because you actually covered Tom Thibodeau since he was part of the New York Knicks, right? Like
both stints.
Yeah. So
all the way back. Yeah.
Have you seen like any changes in like Tibbs's like coaching philosophy since he was here back in like with the first with Jeff Van Gundy to like now, or is he still the same guy that's like defensive oriented, just so rigid, like he's not going to adjust whatsoever? Because us as fans, when we watch this game, we understand that defense is number one priority. Like when you're talking about even adding Obi and Randle to a combination, it's because we're looking for the offensive side. We're looking just to get some more offense out there, especially for a team that struggled offensively to find any rhythm. And Obi just kind of makes that easier just because he's able to leak out and transition and just get easy buckets. Do you think you see Tibbs like adjusting any, like being willing to have, like, there's this conversation of like, maybe you need an offensive coordinator for Tom Thibodeau. Do you see him adjusting in any of those type of standpoints? Because it kind of looks like Tibbs is like the guy and he's going to stay as the guy where it's like, he's not going to rely on his assistant coaches. He's the final decision maker.
Yeah, he's very stubborn. And listen, he's at least when he's in his second stint back in New York, he knew a lot of the writers or some of the writers. So he was a little more relaxed. Like in press conferences, if you watch them, sometimes he'll be joking around and smiling. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He didn't do that in Minnesota. He was very tight in Minnesota. And I guess he was in Chicago for a long enough time, so he got comfortable. But I, I've noticed he's definitely a little more mellow when it comes with the to the riders. But in terms of his coaching style, stubborn. I mean, let's be honest. RJ Barrett sprains his ankle with 19 seconds left in Denver when the Knicks are up 16 points. Why is he in the game? You think that Thibodeau would say, you know what? Let me stop doing that. I mean, when the game is over, let me just put in the bench and the young guys. Yet we're in Orlando, maybe 9 days ago, whenever we were, and they're up 28 points, and Barrett is on the court. Toppin was still on the court. Mitchell Robinson was on the court. It's like, Tom, why? There's 4 minutes left in the game. Put in your young guys. I mean, he's so stubborn with his philosophy. And offensively, he does have certain principles. And he failed to use Obi Toppin the right way. And I know they didn't have a true point guard to really take advantage of Obi going to the basket and getting him involved. But he never put in any plays for Obi to accentuate his skills. And that was a frustrating part. I know the fans were really frustrated, but that's the only thing I could see where Thibodeau blew it with Obi. And he didn't play Obi enough because he didn't think he was a reliable three-point shooter, and he made too many mistakes on the defensive end. But as it turned out, he kept trusting Randle, and Randle just did not have enough leadership on the court and enough shot making from the three-point line to justify his minutes.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the most frustrating part. Do you think Tom would have gone back and now played the young kids, like if he could have, like gave him more trust or anything like that? Or do you think he was still stuck to the same way? Because next season, you see what IQ does, see what Obi does. Hopefully there's some adjustment to let that happen.
Well. They played well after the All-Star break, right? There was some I know there was those loss, but they played well. And so like we were all screaming, "Oh, play the young guys. This is ridiculous." But we're playing well. Like what does Tom Thibodeau, what is he really thinking? Like what's really going on with the Knicks? Like we know what we're feeling and you know what we're feeling. Like, what's actually happening?
Well, Thibodeau probably said it about 1,000 times how well they've played since the All-Star break, even though our record doesn't show it. Although I think they finished one game over 500 after the break. So the record, listen, that's good enough. Actually, this year,
all things considering,
good enough for the 10th seed. 43 and 39, you needed to be 43 and 39 to get the 10th seed. And obviously in the Western Conference, the Knicks would have made the playoffs. But listen, at the All-Star break, we wrote this. There were a couple of, at least two people in the front office that thought Thibodeau had lost the team and they thought they should make a change. And Leon Rose wanted nothing to do with it. He was sticking with his guy. And I think Tom really felt the pressure after the All-Star break to really, really turn it up a notch and play Jericho Sims, because that's what management wanted. It was more cooperation between the front office and the coaching staff. And Tom kept talking about how well they played, I think because he was trying to convince his bosses, don't fire me. And he's safe. But we know that some people in the front office aren't great fans of Thibodeau. So I really feel that if the Knicks have a really rough start to next season, does Thibodeau last the season? I mean, it's going to be a question mark. But I know Thibodeau didn't want to give specifics after the season on what went wrong, and he wants to, quote, dig deep into the factors. But he knows that Julius Randle was their engine, was their on-court leader last season, and this season it just disappeared. The morale of the team was different, and Julius's leadership was different. If you remember last season when he was making his All-Star bid, Thibodeau talked all the time, I don't care about Julius's stats as much as the fact that he's impacting winning. And this season, Julius did not impact winning. He played too selfishly and did not make his teammates better.
I mean, even to that point, you have Tom Thibodeau in the last presser of the season say he's quoting like he's still a 20, 10, 5 guy, which is like,
hey,
really?
trade value.
This is quite a tune change for someone who doesn't really go by stats and is looking at like net rating and stuff like that and lineup changes. So interesting that he used those type of stats. But let's get on to let's move on to the next guy.
Well, that became a big spin. Leon Rose also said that, and Tom said it. It became their thing. The 2010-5 thing became a little bit of a catchphrase for them.
Sure, and all the other guys who are 2010-5 are much more effective when you look at the.
they're not the least efficient player in the NBA. That's kind of how that goes. But it did open it up for RJ, right? It opened it up for RJ to be the leader.
But that was by accident. I mean, that's not what they hoped. The Knicks weren't looking to go into the season and have RJ Barrett be the face of the franchise. Julius Randle had signed the big contract extension as the all-star coming back, and they still wanted RJ to be the second guy. They're a better team if Julius is playing like an all-star and RJ is the sidekick, as it was last season. RJ is a number one. I mean, you talk to scouts, it's like, if RJ is your number one, you're not going to be making the play-in tournament. That's for sure.
So no max
unless
extension.
You're in the Western Conference.
Unless you're in the Western Conference, fair. But so no max extension. Huh? I mean, obviously, when you put out that article, it got some traction, right, with Knicks fans. Like, what we have especially one specific Knicks fan, right? One of your biggest fans. Even wrote a nice little musical on you.
Yeah,
but
beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. So we're sitting here. I mean, we just signed Randall, we lost him. We just signed Noel, we lost him. Derrick Rose, we lost him. As a Knicks fan, the only thing we could grasp onto, right? IQ not playing. RJ, he's all we got. So when you're looking at me and you're like, hey, we should not sign RJ to an extension. Like, what else do I have? Like Grimes? Like, is that really what I'm looking for?
Well, see, that was the perception of what I wrote, but it's not what I wrote.
Yeah.
My point of the story was, is he worth the rookie max of $181 million that Ja Morant signed and that Darius Garland is about to sign when he's eligible, and Ja Morant will sign. So I'm looking at his analytics and his percentages, and he actually went down in his field goal percentage and his three-point shooting percentage, his free throw percentage. His effective field goal percentage is 46%. That's not good. Yeah. So that was my point. A volume shooter has got to have higher percentages if you're going to win. And he showed so many great things. I mean, he's amazing going to the basket. He's such a bull. He has such a high motor. Teams have to double him. But too many times he's forcing stuff and he's turning the ball over, or he has a shot blocked, or, he's trying to fight through traffic. And that's why at the end of the season, there was a few times that Thibodeau, he's not criticizing RJ. He's trying to say, we need this from him next season. He needs to spray the ball when he's doubled and triple teamed. He's got to see the double coming and get rid of it. Spray the ball. That's his big expression. Spray the ball. And if RJ learns to do that more next season, he could be so much more dangerous and so much more of a winning player. And his percentages will be much better, and his assist total as well.
The thing with like RJ, I think the thing when we talk about rookie max extensions is that we can go right over to the Denver Nuggets and we'll get Michael Porter Jr., a guy who had like a bubble, like not even a quarter season. Like he just had an entire Orlando bubble experience, a decent one full healthy season with the Nuggets, gets the extension. But we all knew that this guy is injury prone, but he still gets it. And it's like, you look at RJ and everything that he has had to go through being in New York. Like the first season, it was such a clunky roster. I mean, you had RJ, you had Mook, you had Bobby Portis. It was even spaced out for him to actually like truly operate. Next season, last season, we see him flourish and become this shooter, especially from 3-point land. He has like the mid range at the foul line with the snake dribble. And then this season, we can go back to be like, well, is it really, he wasn't expected to be the number one option. Like he's taking on a bigger responsibility because his running mate, Julius Randle, decided to, for lack of a better word, crap the bed this season. And now it's all back on RJ to go do something. So I think for like fans, we're like, this kid's gone through so much where we haven't really given him a good situation to actually flourish. But we see that work ethic. We see the grit that we're willing to like accept that if he gets the max, especially for him wanting to be here, which we haven't had a player since, I guess, Melo, like being like a true superstar who like came over and said, I want to be part of New York. And we hadn't had someone before that really like Patrick Ewing, who we drafted.
He only practiced for the Knicks, right? In the offseason workouts, he only worked out for the Knicks. He was saying he wants to play for the Knicks. He was playing Duke basketball in the Garden, right? They were joking around, about
Jimmy Kimmel was joking with the Knicks hat and all that type of stuff too. So I think it's like we finally have someone that really just wants to be a Knick, and it's like
playing 40 minutes in Orlando.
And he's actually like, and outside of the statistics, like you just watch, like, I think the elite trait of just like driving to the hoop. It's like, yeah, we want this guy. Like it's like we'll figure it out. Listen, he's only 21.
The fans love him. They're chanting his name on the road at the Garden. He's a great spokesman for the team. And as you said, he wouldn't work out for Memphis. Memphis had the number 2 pick. Memphis wanted to work him out. I mean, they were leading to Ja Morant anyway. But once RJ, they knew RJ didn't even want to be there, so it was a no-brainer. And it was the right pick, obviously. But yeah, listen, all those factors are good reasons to, lean toward a rookie max. You could also let him become a restricted free agent. You have perfect leverage. I mean, if you match any offer. So, like, you don't have to give him the rookie max, but the Knicks they're going to be so over the cap. People even talking about, should we give Cam Reddish an extension? It's like, no, I mean, the guy hasn't proven anything. But I just think that they have to really dig deeper before automatically saying this guy is $181 million player.
Yeah, we got you.
And you could see another season with him and still sign him as a restricted free agent. It would be a little more money, but at least they know, this guy's going to be an all-star.
We're scared of the Mitch situation, honestly, right? We did this. We played the same game, and we did, from my perspective, and I think we just want to kind of lock down our stars early, show them that they're appreciated. But I know, of course, we have no salary cap, but that jumps to one of the guys who we have for cheap, and that's IQ. And IQ was terrible in the beginning of the year. I know the narrative is, oh my goodness, why isn't he starting? Like here at this podcast, we're actually watching the games. Like, we know IQ was horrible in the beginning of the year. And as much as we all yell about Alec Burks, he was our catalyst last season. Like, and there was like a 9-game stretch where Alec Burks was the entire Knicks team. He was the reason why we got the 4th seed, right? So my question is, was the end of the season fool's gold when it comes to IQ? Like, I know 30-point triple doubles, a little bit excessive, but where is the team's perspective on IQ? Can he be our starting point guard? Right, as you said, we have trouble with the cap. He's free, right? Can he start next year, or are we looking, for Tyus Jones, Malcolm Brogdon, as you mentioned, Jalen Brunson, who's rumored? Like, what are your thoughts about IQ there?
The difference between IQ and Obi is IQ did it last season. I mean, he was playing more off the ball, but he was shooting well from the 3-point range, and had some really great moments, and has always been a great free throw shooter. So it's not like all of a sudden he's been playing well for like 10 games. I mean, he was second team all rookie. The thing with IQ at this Las Vegas Summer League, they started the experiment at point guard, and he couldn't hit a 3-pointer. And I kept asking people, is it because he's maybe playing point guard and he's out of rhythm? He's not getting the ball the same way at the 3-point line. And, IQ, I'd asked him, and he says IQ just said I'm just missing shots. Mm-hmm. But it took him a while, I think, to get comfortable at the point guard position. He's become a better playmaker. I honestly feel good about where he is as a point guard. I think coming out of the draft, we know he fell to 25. He didn't fall. He was going to be an early 2nd-round pick if the Knicks didn't take him at 25. Yeah. And that's because he didn't have a position. They didn't see him as a point guard coming out of Kentucky. He wasn't a playmaker at Kentucky. And I think the growth from IQ, and especially he's such a hard worker. This kid talked the other day about going into the Tarrytown gym at 1 in the morning on Christmas night after having Christmas dinner at Obi Toppin's house just to shoot. And that's after having a Christmas afternoon, a Christmas matinee. So the kid's such a hard worker, and that's why the Knicks brass is so excited that he's going to just keep getting better. He loves the game. And yeah, is he a good enough defender? No, he's got to get stronger, and he admitted that. But I think there's potential to be a starting point guard. Is it next season? I mean, I hope they could get an established point guard to start, but as a fallback, it's not out of the question now that IQ could be their starting point guard next season because of how hard he works. And Thibodeau said after the season, those guys that work that hard, we know they're getting better.
But isn't that like the concern? Like we talk about the money issue, right? So say if you have to go do a sign and trade with someone like Jalen Brunson, who's looking for like 20 plus million annually, and then you have someone in IQ where he's already on your books. And as John mentioned, he's cheaper, like much cheaper than having to pay 20 million. Don't you think it'd just be better for the Knicks just to move with IQ moving forward and not even play that fallback option? Because say if you do sign someone like Jalen Brunson, and this is just like Nick's dilemma with anybody that we try to sign that we spend a lot of money. It's like, oh my God, what if they're not the same person that they were on the other team? So isn't it just better just to move with like, all right, why don't we just continue to develop this guy? He was playing close to 30 minutes towards the end of the season. Let him run full rampant with the point guard position, because then even after next season, even if he struggles, it can kind of give you clarity if you need a point guard going into the next season. Don't you think the Knicks should just do that instead?
Listen, if they could get Jalen Brunson as an unrestricted free agent and, not give up much in a sign and trade, I think you got to do it. I mean, Jalen's on a team that's the 4th seed in the Western Conference and really has learned a lot under Jason Kidd. I think he's an upgrade over IQ right now. But listen, you make a good point. It's just, again, he didn't do it for 82 games. As you said, he really struggled early in the season shooting and everything, and his minutes were reduced because of it. It's just, how much do you value late in the season when teams are kind of resting players for the playoffs and other teams are just tanking? I mean, the Knicks were playing teams that just weren't fielding their first unit. Like they were they just weren't the same team as earlier in the season. So it might be tough to gauge, but listen, at least it's part of the conversation. Yeah. I think 3 weeks ago, no one would ever have dreamed, oh yeah, IQ will be their starting point guard.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
A ludicrous statement. But now we can at least say, if they don't get Brogdon, if Jalen re-signs with Dallas, hey, maybe IQ and Derrick Rose, with a little Miles McBride sprinkled in, maybe we could get by. But they have to make some upgrades. And,
look at that optimism. Optimism from Berman, right? Everyone's like, look at that.
I know, but there's got to be upgrades. There's got to be more. There's got to be upgrades. And maybe it's at the center position. Maybe it's Fournier, as good a 3-point shooter as he was sort of a minus player. Defensively, he just is not a Thibodeau type of guy. And Thibodeau didn't often play him in the 4th quarter. He didn't trust his defense. So there's got to be upgrades on this roster. And obviously they need Derrick Rose. He's under contract. He's got to be healthy next year.
Poor Evan Fournier, man. Break Starks' record, doesn't play in the 4th quarter, and we just don't even care. Poor guy. And he won the first game for the Celtics. Like, that was a crazy game. Poor guy. Let me last thing on this season. We talk about, it fell off. We don't know what happened. You mentioned, IQ wants to shoot around, after Christmas dinner. There was this whole narrative last season about, the Knicks led by Julius Randle taking the Kobe Bryant philosophy of every time you land on the road, you find a gym. I don't care if it's 2 a.m, right? You find the high school gym, you get in there and you have to shoot around so you can be ready for the next, the next game. Was that happening this year? I know it was not mentioned at all, right? COVID went down this year as opposed to last season. So do you think that had anything, was that happening, number one? And if yes, if no, do you think that had any effect on the squad?
Yeah, it was not happening as much with Julius Randle. one of the things about last season that was so unique was when they were on the road, they were together all the time. They were not allowed to go out to a restaurant, with friends or leave the hotel essentially. So, you land and you go to the gym because what else are you going to do? Sit in the hotel and do nothing? So there was such a bond created by last season's team because they were all trapped in the hotel together on the road. But now, Julius could go out and, with family or do whatever he wanted. So that camaraderie was just not there this season. Last season, it was talked about all the time how close-knit this club was, but we didn't hear a lot of that. And what I did hear was that Julius was aloof and he wasn't a leader. And I think he just soured on the season once the fans got on him. And, it's not easy to play in New York, and head coaches like Mike D'Antoni, he was always disappointed in the Garden as a home court advantage because he knew when things got ugly, the fans would start booing and it hurt the team's psyche. And he just didn't understand why the fans would boo. He's from, he was coaching in Phoenix where the fans don't boo at all. So he was a little naive, but even Fizdale thought it was tough to be the home team at the Garden because other players come into the Garden and want to put on a show. Yeah. And, sometimes Knicks fans actually get into it when, Steph Curry is lighting it up. And earlier in December when Steph broke
the record. I was there. We stopped the whole game.
The game, the Garden was going nuts every time he touched the ball. I couldn't believe it. If I was a Knicks player, I'd be like, wow. I mean, there were a lot of Warriors fans there, but I think some Knicks fans want to see history. Yeah.
There's a lot of us. I mean, the tickets were reselling for like $700. That's us. Yeah. That's not people coming from Golden State. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. It was crazy. But anyway, last season was unique in the fact that it was empty half the season and then 1,900 the rest of the season. And there were no boos. It was the height of the pandemic still. Everyone was more charitable. There was no booing. They were just happy to be at a basketball game, watching a live event. And this season, the boos started early and often.
So what do you think the Knicks fans get wrong the most?
Listen, there's another incident that has always bothered me. It was Frank Ntilikina, Dennis Smith Jr. when they were kind of fighting for playing time. Yep. It was 2 seasons ago. And I remember Dennis Smith Jr. bringing the ball up court and the fans were chanting for Frank. And I was like, wow, how is a player supposed to play at a high level when your own fans are chanting for another guy to go onto the court? And I think Dennis was shaken by that, and he never really recovered. And he was soon traded to Detroit in the Rose deal. But I just don't get it. And even when Julius is on the court and you're chanting for Obi, it just doesn't help. I mean, listen, I'm not going to criticize Knicks fans because they are the most passionate in the league because there's been so much losing over the last 21 years, and they're still as fiercely into it as ever. I mean, like the Nets fans, I mean, I think there's a lot of bandwagon Nets fans now, but there's just no comparison. Listen, there's not enough Nets fans in town, but even the Nets fans that are in town, they're just not passionate like the Knicks fans. But I feel they're a little overzealous when it comes to chanting someone's name who's on the bench when another guy is trying to, play to a high level.
What about Melo? Like Melo was here, and I feel like because Melo got a lot of heat as well. Like there's some boos, he got the cheers. Like we saw like that kid, Rasheed Wallace team, Raymond Felton. That team was like everyone was happy during that season. But then later on, Melo got a lot of heat. How do you think Melo was able to handle that? I mean, you were there for that too, Berman.
Yeah, well, see, I feel that when Melo had his war with Phil Jackson, I think almost all the fans were signing with Melo. So, yeah, he took some heat. But listen, he got injured, one season, and he missed a lot of clutch shots. I thought the fans treated him okay. Honestly, I think they were very happy that he wanted to be in New York,
Mm.
and he forced a trade to New York, and he's from New York originally. Uh, Considering that I feel he underperformed here, I didn't think he got a raw deal with the fans. And listen, I think someone asked me on a podcast earlier today about Melo next season as a Knick. I think he's got one season left. I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, obviously, Leon Rose is his former agent. He loves Carmelo. Carmelo loves New York. They could use some veteran leadership. Maybe he could have an effect on Julius Randle. Who knows? He's going to be a free agent. I don't think he wants to come back to Lakerland. I mean, this was a
I don't
disaster.
think anyone
That was a
wants to go
disaster.
there.
Right. And he still was hitting his 3-point shots. I mean, he didn't affect winning, but he still could play a little bit. So who knows? I mean, he's
Hopefully he
not going
brings
to look
Malik
for a lot of
Monk,
money.
Hopefully he brings Malik Monk with him. I'll take both of those guys.
Yeah, he's a pretty good shooter. The Lakers situation is so mystifying. It really is. I mean, how that team collapsed. And it'll be very interesting to see if Mark Jackson, who has not gotten an interview in years, if the Lakers bring him in. Obviously, LeBron would be the person
Ultimate
with the final
GM.
say.
The
Yes.
ultimate GM, man. Good for him. Good for him.
It will be interesting to see if LeBron hires Mark Jackson.
Yeah, exactly. It's awesome. It's awesome. If I was him, I would do that too. Hire whoever I want.
Mark,
It
before
might
we
be worth the gamble.
Yeah.
get you out of here, we want to ask you like a few more questions about your tenure covering the beat. So, how's it been just being a beat reporter for like the New York Knicks for such a long time? Like, you've seen it all. You've legitimately seen it all. So, like, how do you describe this entire tenure, just like covering this team?
Yeah, well, 22 seasons are in the book, and
Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah, awesome, man. Especially for the
been a long
Knicks,
ride.
like God bless your health. Right? Like
yeah, listen, I mean, the only regret is all the losing. It has been so many losing seasons. I took over a team that had just made the NBA Finals. The first season, they went to the conference finals, and then Ewing, obviously demanded a trade, and they made a bad trade, and they probably should have kept him and got in the cap space. And so there's been so many bad decisions I've had to right through. But listen, again, it's just an amazing experience because the fans, again, are so passionate. They love this team to death. Even through all the losing, they're still reading the Knicks stories. They care about the 15th man. I don't know how it is covering the Indiana Pacers when they're not playing well. There's no interest. But no, it's great. And like the beat writers, I've been with so many different ones across the years. Naturally, Isola has been on the beat for a few years, but it was always fun with him. And Alan Hahn used to be on the beat. Now he's at MSG Network. And now we got a very good group with Steph Bondi and Begley and Fred Katz. And those are guys who are on the road and we're taking cabs together and we're eating out and we're on the planes. So, those are guys, even though they're competitors, those are kind of like your coworkers, really.
yeah.
But it's been a thrill, honestly, and I can't believe 22 seasons. If you could really believe it, it feels like it flew by. I mean, I can't believe that 22 seasons are in the books. It feels like it was yesterday where I was doing the Islanders when Greg Gallo, the former sports editor, called me up and said, "We need you to do the Knicks." And I was like, all right. I mean, I love the Islanders. I'm from Long Island, but I knew it was a big promotion.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations again. But like, congratulations on 22 years, Mark. That's quite an awesome feat just to be covering a team for that long, especially one that's just been so down and bad for most of that time. Out of all of your times covering the New York Knicks, what would you say if it can get like 3 ranks? Where are the 3 favorite times covering the Knicks? What would they be? 3 favorite seasons, I should say.
Right. I know it's so recent, but I will say that game 1 of the playoffs against Atlanta, when the Garden was finally packed and 40 minutes before tip-off, and I guess you guys were there maybe that night, and the fans were chanting, "Let's go Knicks." Yeah, and they were chanting Trey Young the Trae Young
it's
chant.
balding. But I can
Balding,
scream. I can scream that, right?
That was
We
funny.
can yell it.
Yeah. And then a more profane chant after that. But
Sure.
it just felt like the pandemic was over. And it turned out it wasn't over. But it felt that night that the pandemic had finally ended to have, and I don't even remember, I think the fans were not, it wasn't mandatory to wear masks. I can't even remember, but it was just so loud. It was such a great first game. And that is like, I know it's so recent, so it feels like a big memory right now, but it was great. And that 2012-13 season, the 54-win season was just such a ride. It was such a fun ride. I thought they were going to the finals, and the Indiana series, they blew it against Boston. If they would have not Boston, if they swept Boston, J.R. Smith doesn't get suspended, but Boston forced them to two more games, and then they only had 1 day of preparation for Indiana. But I really thought that was a team going to the NBA Finals, and I loved covering that team. And Linsanity, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I was doing 15 radio interviews a day. I mean, that month, it was probably 5 weeks, but I mean, it was like, I felt like it was in a movie. I honestly felt like, all right, this is a Disney movie.
The Toronto game straight up felt fake.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Pleasant Peter in Toronto. Yeah. I mean, I just felt like I was in the middle of a Disney movie. It was such a wonderful experience, and sorry it ended so soon. And I blame Carmelo a little bit. He came back, and I remember that All-Star game. Before the All-Star game, we were talking to Carmelo. Lynn was invited to play in one of the skills contests. I can't remember what Jeremy was invited for, but Carmelo was holding media availability, and the first 5 questions were about Jeremy Lin. And by the 5th question, he was rolling his eyes and saying, "Aren't going to ask about me." And I knew right then and there
that's over.
It wasn't going to work out great between Carmelo and Jeremy.
Oh, man.
Do you have a good relationship with these players? I mean, it can't go unnoticed. I mean, 3 players this year on the roster, they all had comments to you, right?
Berman,
like,
relax. Relax.
Like everyone's giving you like something, right? RJ or whoever. Like, do you have an actual good relationship, and you guys are just like, kind of just playing around?
Yeah, there's some playing around. Listen, it's been a frustrating season, but when we're in the locker room, like Mitchell, like, the cameras are never on, but we're in the locker room. Mitchell was always busting my balls, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay.
So, like, this was just a carryover. Now we're on Zoom. Everything's being filmed, so people actually see it on camera when it's been in the locker room for years. Everyone's busting each other's balls. You're around each other so much. But the Julius thing was a little tense, I will say, in Los Angeles. That was before a Lakers game, I think, and I had brought up the trade rumor that he was change that I just didn't expect, and he was angry, and even there was more to it that you guys didn't see. He was so,
so Randle has it out for everyone. Yeah, I got you. I got that's refreshing to know, because you're going to be in the locker room next year, right? So hopefully, that'll build back up, and that'll be much better going forward. So we're looking forward to
it's been very tough not being in the locker room, but we're hearing very good things that Adam Silver is softening up, and we'll be back in there.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And then I guess like the last question I have just for you as like a journalist, what is the day of Marc Berman like covering the New York? Like, how does that go? Like an entire, like, because I can't picture it's like a normal 9 to 5 where it's like, all right, wake up, go there, you're there, and do all this stuff. Well, what is like a beat report? Like, how does that life go?
Well, I will say that when we're on the road, you're working pretty much all day. So we'll be, say, in Indiana, and we're going to the 10:30 a.m. shoot around to talk to the coach and a couple of players. And then we, walk back to the hotel, and we're writing for the web and for our early editions, and maybe have a lunch. But before you know it, we're back at the arena, 2.5 hours before the game to talk to the coach again. And so it's very time consuming, and the travel has become, especially during the pandemic, the travel is even more difficult with the security lines. It's a rugged beat, and at 22 years, I don't know how I've done it, but You need a lot of coffee. I drink probably 6 cups of coffee a day. And hearing about the same topic, yeah, well, on game days probably because you're drinking coffee at 10 p.m. to get through the final game start. But it's a rugged beat. But listen, baseball is even tougher. The spring training days, you get into the ballpark at 8 in the morning, and you're there to early evening. So, it's a rugged beat. But writing about the same subject for 22 years, sometimes there's no great story to write that day, but you still have to write it. So, and we have more space than any newspaper in New York and maybe in the country. So I'm writing 2, 3 stories, 4 stories sometimes, for early editions, and then that gets subbed out for later stories. So it's a lot of work. I know a lot of people, say, oh, I want to be a sports writer, but you got to put in the work.
Wow, there you go. And there you have it. So anyone out there who's aspiring to be a beat writer, especially in the New York landscape, God bless you. 6 cups of coffee. Man. Woohoo! What's your favorite type of coffee? Are you going Starbucks? Are you going Dunkin'? Is it home? What are we doing here?
I mean, I love Starbucks, but I like those independent coffee shops more. And on the road, I'll go to a coffee shop and after a shoot around, I'll find an independent coffee shop, get a couple of cups, and write my early story. So basically, coffee has saved me for 22 years. There's no doubt about it. I could not have done it without a strong cup of coffee, and many of them.
And now what Berman is not directly saying, he's saying football writers got it the easiest.
We all know that.
You hear that, Kaz? Kaz, you hear that? You're in the Jets for a while, Kaz, but he's talking to you.
Yeah. So Kaz has been on the show?
No.
Not yet.
We follow all you guys. We follow all you guys.
Yeah. We're working on the Jets draft is coming, so it's the busiest time. So we try not to, get in the way there. So we'll work on it.
We actually had DJ Bienemy from the Daily News on last year, right after the Jets draft. So we try to make sure we get the beat writers in and make sure
we were informed that after the draft is the right time. So we're waiting.
But I mean, you should reach out to Kaz. He does a lot of FAN stuff. I think he's still a regular contributor there. But yeah, Kaz likes to go on the podcast.
Oh, don't worry. We'll be reaching out to Kaz.
We're reaching out with your blessing.
Go for it.
Well, Mark,
appreciate it, man.
Thank you for hopping on. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate your time. Thank you for giving us all this time. And for everyone out there that's listening, please let them know where they can find you, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, nypost.com, and then all the newsstands in New York and New Jersey and Florida and even California.
And the Twitter.
And Albany, Buffalo. But listen, my Knicks newsletter is the new thing. We started it this season. It's behind a paywall, but it's well worth it. We got some, extra information that we did a thing on Donovan Mitchell today on what it would take and how Dwayne Wade, a minority owner for the Utah Jazz, could be a factor in keeping Donovan happy in Utah for the long term. We'll see. A lot of people think if Utah is bounced out by the Mavericks in the first round, that Donovan might feel it's time to divorce from Rudy Gobert.
It's an interesting series because Luka's injured and Brunson trying to get paid. So if the Mavs do win and it's Brunson's fault, then he's out. He's out for the Knicks. So we'll see.
No, Knicks fans should pay attention to that series. If there's one series besides Brooklyn to check out, it's Mavericks versus the Jazz.
That's for sure. There's a lot of moving pieces in that one that all Knicks fans should have their eyes on. But Mark, thank you once again. To our listeners, please make sure to follow Mark on Twitter. Please make sure to keep reading his articles. I mean, I'm sure you have. If you're a Knicks fan, you're tuning into us. We're just so fresh and young into this. But
get into the newsletter. He's definitely
been following Berman before we even heard of us. So please make sure to keep following Berman. He does a great job over the New York Post. I've been reading Mark since I've been
a Knicks fan.
Yeah,
literally.
Day I was born.
We appreciate you coming.
Day I was born.
We appreciate you coming here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Alex, John, thanks so much. I had a great time.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And to all of our listeners out there, you know what to do. If you make sure to follow us on all social media platforms, we're on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. All right. Please make sure to do that. Also, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast. We're on all available audio listening platforms, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon, Alexa, Stitcher, you name it, we are there. And last and certainly not least, please make sure to check out Winning Picks Weekly and the YouTube. Just go over Knicks, Jets, etc. Period. Subscribe, hit that notification bell. That way you know when a new episode drops. Make sure to hit the like button and comment. All right, everyone. That's another Knicks episode for the Knicks, Jets, etc. podcast. We out.
Let's go Knicks.